Welcome back, boils and ghouls. It is trivia time. Tonight's dastardly tale of verbose Venom is the real-life secret origins of the character that would become known as Venom. Now, this is my first ever fan-requested video, and I'd really like to thank TM Comics for requesting it. I've spent a long time getting to the bottom of the story of the character that would eventually become known as Venom, and I can't wait to share the entire story with you guys. So, kick back and enjoy this epic, turbulent, and sometimes really confusing trip through the history of the character that we have come to know and love simply as Venom. Now, by the late 70s and early 80s, Marvel saw a problem with Spider-Man. He was becoming too kid-friendly. I mean, Marvel had done it to themselves. With its massive exposure on children's programming, like the Electric Company, they often released toned-down comic versions of the cartoons, and these cartoons were already toned-down versions of the comic. And the result was that a lot of people were starting to think of Spider-Man as uncool. For Jim Salicrup, this was unforgivable, and he knew they needed to do something drastic to fix it. However, during this time, there was a seemingly unending succession of new editors-in-chief at Marvel, and Jim Salicrup stepped down before he ever really got the chance. Enter Illinois resident and Spider-Man superfan, Randy Schuler. Now, Randy Schuler claims that he was responding to open talent calls from Marvel Comics, solicited in unnamed sources. Jim Shooter, who was by then editor-in-chief, claims the exact opposite, of course. He calls Randy Schuler's pitch for a new Spider-Man suit simply, quote-unquote, unsolicited. Schuler claims that Marvel openly solicited material from fans, and they did do this. But not in 1981 like Randy Schuler seems to remember. Prior to 1983, when Marvel started to publish the official Marvel Tryout magazine, I am unaware of them ever asking for unsolicited material. I really don't think they ever wanted to deal with the headache, honestly. And since we're talking about Jim Shooter, essentially comic book's greatest villain, and an essential unknown whose timelines don't really add up and who's kind of vague about details and never really got his foot in the door, seemingly for a number of reasons that we'll hit on, I don't know if we're ever gonna know the actual truth of this situation. What we do know is that on August 3rd of 1982, Jim Shooter sent this letter from the official Marvel office to Randy Schuler stating he quote-unquote wanted to buy it. The offer was for $220 whopping dollars and a shot at scripting the story. Now, this sounds like a dream for a fan. Everything is going right, but this is where things fell apart for Randy Schuler. One of two things is true in this story. Randy Schuler is either an extremely terrible storyteller and more of like a great big idea kind of guy like George Lucas, or Marvel really had it out for him from day one because he might have claims to things that they didn't want him to have claim to. So his original plot for the black suit was that it was going to be designed by the Wasp. And at the time, she was a fashion designer in the comics, and she basically showed up in every other freaking issue with a new suit. So it kind of made sense. It was also going to be fashioned from the same unstable molecules that the Fantastic Four made their suits out of. And it was going to allow Spider-Man to cling to walls better and make him stronger somehow. But here's the kicker. He was also going to get new web shooters. They weren't going to be organic ones, but oh no. Randy Schuler wanted to give him web shooters designed off of Tony Stark Iron Man technology. You know, exactly like they did 30 years later in Civil War and then all of the Marvel Cinematic Universe films. Schuler is, however, quick to point out that his original design included a blood red emblem, and it had the original Steve Ditko like web wings on the arms, which quickly differentiated from what we saw in final printed form. The web wings were ditched basically by everyone that I'm aware of that took a crack at designing, even before Mike Zeck, who would design the end product that we saw for the most part, started to finalize the design. They were out of the picture, and this can be evidenced by the original prototype images that were released in Marvel Age 12. Randy Schuler says that Marvel initially simply was not happy with the story that he gave them, so he sent them a rewrite. But they didn't like that either. And after a few letters back and forth, according to Randy Schuler, he just stopped responding. And it sounds plausible because Tom DeFalco, who was the editor-in-chief on Spider-Man, seemed brutally adamant in every interview that I read that basically the story didn't quote-unquote did not make sense. He would basically call the story complete shit. And Jim Shooter said the totality of Randy Schuler's contribution to the entire idea could be summed up in 2 words: black suit. Now, both of these guys seem to be vigorously making sure that Randy Schuler has no monetary claim to Spider-Man's black suit, and therefore Venom and a ton of other highly profitable characters like, I don't know, Carnage and Toxin, who are all spawned by the Venom suit. Now, after the failed attempts to rewrite the story, the black suit concept got shelved until Jim Shooter decided to use it as a gimmick for 1983's Secret Wars, according to Jim Shooter. Now, according to Jim Shooter, his only instruction to Mike Zeck was quote-unquote black suit. If that's the case, though, it is a hell of a coincidence that Mike Zeck would select the exact same blood red emblem on the chest. This more clearly indicates that Jim Shooter had been actively trying to make this idea work for a while, without the participation of someone that they knew might have claims to stuff and want money. And in all reality, it seems like either Randy Schuler was really bad at standing up for himself, or he was really bad at telling stories. I don't know which. Whatever the case may be, Randy Schuler came up with the idea for Spider-Man's black costume. And until 2019, when Spider-Man Self-Improvement, the one-shot, came out, he never even saw his name in print. In 1984, Secret Wars came out, and Jim Shooter passed down the idea for the black suit redesign. So Mike Zeck won the competition and did the covers for Secret Wars, but the task of coming up with an explanation for why Spider-Man was changing his costume, like that fell to Tom DeFalco. Jim Shooter wasn't big on little details like why stuff happened or if it made sense. He was more of a big idea guy, like, I want Spider-Man to have a black suit. So he basically left the entire thing up to Tom DeFalco, who decided from the start, according to interviews with him, that the suit was going to be a living being and a quote-unquote symbiote. Now, in Secret Wars, everyone is hanging out on the moon. I don't really want to get into the storyline, but obviously they're all away from their houses and therefore their costumes. And of course they're getting into fights, so their costumes are getting all jacked up. Well, they get really stoked up because they find alien tech that gives them their suits back. They're really stoked up, and as always, Spider-Man shows up late, and they just point him in the general direction. And Spider-Man, of course, uses the wrong machine. So we never knew what was up with the suit. It did stuff that everybody else's suit didn't do. At this point, Spider-Man sees a spike in sales. I don't know if this was the black suit or because the storylines were starting to get more serious and Marvel was actually trying to put a little bit more time and effort into Spider-Man again, or what. What I do know is that Web of Spider-Man was launched. Originally, I believe Web of Spider-Man was headed by Louise Simonson, who we seem to talk about all the time, and we will probably continue to talk about all the time because she is awesome. However, another writer would join the staff pretty early on, a writer named David Michelini. Now, David Michelini had a hidden agenda. He wanted to get Spider-Man out of this black suit and back into his red and blue traditional suit, despite the fact that the black suit was doing really well. David McFarlane would eventually make the move from Web of Spider-Man to Amazing Spider-Man, which is a pretty prestigious jump, I might add. Early in his writing run on Web, McFarlane began to tease a mystery villain that did not trigger Spider-Man's spider sense. And it was in issue 18 that we see a hand wearing, I think it's a pink sweater, reaches out and pushes Peter Parker off of a railroad landing. Now he's almost hit by the train, but he makes it out of the way. This attack really shakes him up though for two reasons. The first, of course, is that it didn't trigger his spider sense, which is really troubling. But the second is that he was dressed as Peter Parker. So whoever attacked him knows that Spider-Man is Peter Parker. Also during this period, we do get a few little tidbits about what the alien symbiote is up to, which is essentially running around the city with no host looking for Peter Parker. There's even a piece in the end of Fantastic Four 252 or 254 where we see a repeated shot from a later Web of Spider-Man issue of the symbiote actually breaking out. And in Web of Spider-Man 24, we see that mysterious hand again grab Peter as he's jumping off the side of a building, and it nearly kills him this time. Again, it does not trigger his spider sense, and again, he is not dressed up as Spider-Man. He's really starting to get shook up. Now, David McFarlane has said that this mysterious villain was originally going to be Venom, but here's the kicker. He was originally going to be a she. The basic gist of Venom is really weird. She was going to spin out of the pages of Marvel graphic novel number 19, Revenge of the Living Monolith, which was, of course, written by David McFarlane. Now, this is like even more depressing than the death of Captain Marvel. I don't even really want to touch on how depressing the story is, but essentially the living pharaoh is turned into this guy who is called the Living Monolith. He's enormous, like Galactus sized. And he runs around New York basically Godzilla stomping a bunch of shit. And what they do is they take the Gojira angle and look at it from the human's perspective of massive collateral damage and devastation. It is super depressing. During this, I forget whether Spider-Man is running away, which he does in that, because he figures out that he is totally outclassed, or he's still fighting, but a cabbie is distracted by Spider-Man, and he hits some random guy. This random guy dies, and this random guy has a wife who is apparently traumatized by all of this and ends up having a freaking miscarriage. So originally, she was going to be Venom. That makes a lot of sense to me. She would have hated Spider-Man. David McFarlane had this idea. He knew she was going to be the one that bonded with the alien symbiote, but he could not sell it to anyone. Now, as I said, there was a parade of editors-in-chief out at Marvel at this period, and at this time, I'm sure it has nothing to do with Jim Shooter, yeah, but there was a ton of artists that were leaving Marvel Comics to go work for DC, if that tells you anything about the tyrannical atmosphere of Marvel Comics at this time. However, there was one guy looking to make that jump from DC to Marvel, a fresh-faced, new up-and-comer named Todd McFarlane. Now, apparently, when Todd McFarlane was offered the run of Amazing Spider-Man, he had a stipulation. And this stipulation was that Spider-Man get back into his red and blue costume. He hated the black suit, man. He still hates the black suit. Believe it or not, Tom DeFalco himself wanted the red and blue back as well and ended up hiring him because he thought they would get along. Now, as soon as McFarlane got on the book, he started working with McFarlane towards getting Spider-Man out of that damned black suit. He hated it. He hated it so much. He hated it more than I can actually tell you. And in fact, he hates it so much, I found a great Instagram video where he shows you just how much he dislikes that suit. So check out this 1-minute video and we will be right back.
So how does this page become the creation of Venom? That's easy. I came into the Spider-Man office after doing the Hulk, and they wanted me to do Spider-Man, but he was in this black costume. I didn't want to draw this black costume. It meant nothing to me. I wanted to draw the red and blue. So they said, Todd, if you just come on in 298, we promise that maybe we can get rid of it. And I go, well, let's just get rid of it fast. So I did a character. I ripped the costume off him. I did this character called Venom, handed it to David McFarlane, the writer, and they said, just hold on. So then all of a sudden, I do 298. No, he's still in the black. 299, he's still in the black. Finally, 300. Look at, I even sitting here on the cover sketch, and I say, can we do one in the black and the red? Come on, I want to do the black and the red. And they said, yeah, fine. So essentially, 300 is the origin of Venom, but to me, it's how the hell do we get this goddamn black costume off Peter Parker issue?
Yeah, I told you, not a fan. And we were looking at previews of issue 300, right? Well, when it came to issue 300, Tom DeFalco decided in the end that switching from the black to the red and blue traditional costume simply was not going to be a big enough deal. He basically, for lack of a better term, Jim Shooters them and is like, no, you guys have to come up with a brand new supervillain who is amazingly cool that is going to sell this anniversary issue for me to give you permission to make the switch back and make this stuff all work. So David McFarlane is like, oh man, I've got this covered, and he immediately comes out with his pitch for the female Venom. Tom DeFalco is still not buying it though. Todd McFarlane, however, he's making this work. Spider-Man is getting out of that black suit, man. He hated it. One way or the other, Spider-Man is getting out of that black suit. So he did, as he put it, what an editor does when they want to change something major without telling the writer or the artist, and they go directly to the editor-in-chief. And that's what he did. He went to the editor-in-chief of Spider-Man, Tom DeFalco, and he got the blessing on his ideas so that he could go back to David McFarlane with absolutely no culpability, but also having the blessing of Tom DeFalco on his story, and knowing that David McFarlane was not going to go argue with Tom DeFalco. His idea was that basically Spider-Man could only get beat by a bigger, badder version of himself. And so that's what he set out to design. McFarlane was also only told that the symbiote was an alien, not that it was going to be bonded with a person. He simply went off and designed Spider-Man with a big creepy mouth and those killer teeth. He said he would have completely done the design differently if he'd known that there was going to be someone inside of the suit. And in fact, he was totally weirded out when he got the original scripts back from David McFarlane, who painstakingly scripted this stuff out, I might add. And basically, that's the story of Venom. He was created on a basic whim by Todd McFarlane as a knockoff of Spider-Man out of essentially necessity, because McFarlane wanted him out of that black suit so bad he just wanted him back in his red and blues. And David McFarlane, he wanted him back in his red and blues, so he went along with it. And Tom DeFalco, he wanted him back in his red and blues, so he approved it. And it's ironic and weird and kind of sad that this really kind of quick decision has become one of the most iconic characters in Spider-Man of the last several decades at least, and made everybody involved in the situation a massive boatload of cash. Everybody involved made a ton of money. Everybody except for Randy Schuler. Everybody except for the guy who came up with the idea for the suit that would become a symbiote, that would then become Spider-Man's black suit, that would become Venom. The man that painstakingly thought out all of these ideas about how this suit was going to work and how it was going to fit into the Marvel Universe, and gave so much attention to little detail, despite whether the fact he might have been a terrible writer. Randy Schuler, the man who had to wait until 2019 to see his name in print in a comic book. Randy Schuler, the Illinois Spider-Man superfan, that weird, quirky guy who came up with the idea that would blossom into Venom. And that is the real-life, true, secret origins of Venom. I hope you guys enjoyed. Thank you so much for sticking with me. Maybe you learned something. If you did enjoy, please hit that like button. If you really enjoyed what you saw, Hulk smash that subscribe button. If you do that, ding that little notification bell to keep up with these doses of trivia that I'm always dropping. And if you really enjoyed what you saw, also get down in the comments section below and let me know. If you want to see an episode about something, get down in the comments section below and let me know. As I said, this is my first fan requested video and I'm really excited to share it with you guys. I hope you enjoyed. I hope you learned something. Thanks again for sticking with me. And as always, I really, truly, and honestly ask only two things. Keep reading comic books and keep hitting those local shops.